Well, official welcome everyone. This is our Versatility Ranch Horse free webinar. I'm going to introduce our special guest here in just a minute, but as I'm sure you can see on the screen, we are lucky enough to have Bryce Briggs joining us today. We've known Bryce for a couple of years. He is definitely what I would consider a very knowledgeable professional in the world of versatility ranch horse, cow horse. I consider him a friend, and he is what? How many time world champion now, Bryce? A lot.
Yeah, I mean we're pushing, including the APHA. We're pushing 20. So
nice. Well, we'll jump into that in just a minute here. So let's just run through a quick kind of agenda of what we're going to do. So we'll do the quick introductions. We sort of started with that. We'll talk real quickly about what is VRH, the VRH classes, VRH divisions. Bryce is going to go in depth about some points, how the all-around awards work. It's a little different than maybe what you would have thought from either our horse shows or AQHA shows, and then some things you want to keep in mind as we start talking about VRH. So, and we'll have questions at that point as well. So, if this is your first time with us, we are West Coast Ranch Horse. We were founded January 2020. We are a not-for-profit organization headquartered here in Temecula, California. We started off producing high quality all breed classes, and then in the last 3 years, we've added AQHA shows to that, and then we'll, obviously this year we're supplementing that with VRH offerings as well. We pride ourselves in the place where a lot of riders that ride at the national level really got their start in ranch events right here in Southern California with West Coast Ranch Horse. So our special guest today, Mr. Bryce Briggs, we talked real briefly about him. He's comes to us today from Pilot Point, Texas, professional AQHA, horseman, judge, and international clinician. Highest accolades in the VRH world, roping and cow horse, multiple world champions, and he is also a member of West Coast Ranch Horses board. So without further ado, I welcome to the webinar, Mr. Bryce Briggs.
thank you, Sean. So today we're going to kind of talk about, what is VRH. So VRH is hang on, I don't know why this TV keeps coming on. VRH is kind of, I'd almost call it like a sister organization of AQHA. It has its own set of rules. They kind of have their own way of qualifying. That's not quite traditional to AQHA, and we'll get into more of that as these slides go. But what we're trying to see in the VRH is a horse that can, basically go do real ranch work on a ranch, everything from working and sorting cattle, what that ideal ranch horse is supposed to mean. That's what the confirmation comes in, kind of, what these ranches have based their breeding programs around, creating, fundamentally conformational horses that fit the description of what a ranch horse really should be. And then we have the 6 main events to the VRH. We have confirmation, ranch riding, ranch trail, ranch reining, ranch cutting, and ranch cow work. And those all kind of they vary per division in the ranch cow work. What boxing down the fence, or boxing down the fence, or box drive, and those are kind of each for each perspective division.
And Bryce, just let me know when you want to advance slides.
Okay. So here on this slide, we kind of have what we just talked about, those 6 different events, ranch riding. I would say, kind of let's dive into that a little bit. What's the difference between ranch riding like we see at like the major AQHA shows and VRH? And there's little difference, but there's also a lot of difference. And what I mean by that is, VRH is kind of, it's kind of built off the all around. That's the main prize. That's how you earn your AQHA points, is through the all around, and all around eligible horses you're competing against. And so with that being said, ranch riding has evolved at the national level as far as AQHA and APHA would go, to really kind of fitting a pattern oriented horse. And a lot of times that's a reiner. That's what we've bred reiners to be, our ranch riders. Or that's why we like, I guess I should say, the reining bred horses and the ranch riding, is they're so pattern oriented. It's very similar to the reining in a sense. You teach them a pattern, they understand it. But in VRH, the judges are, I would say, we're more looking for a horse that's doing that ranch riding at that same level, but we're accepting of what it looks like to be a cow horse, if that makes sense, and a quote unquote ranch horse that does the cattle events. So we're a little bit more. We're seeing more kind of level top lines, even above level, because when we go down the fence, those horses raise their heads and necks up, and they run with confidence, kind of uphill. And so when we're judging the ranch riding, we're taking that into account. Can this horse with that frame go be able to cut a cow and do the cow work? And so I would say that there's a kind of a different handful of horses that do well in the ranch riding at the VRH events than just strictly ranch riding events, because as a judge, we're judging that horse to be in there for the all around, and as long as it's doing those maneuvers in a quality manner, without breaking gait and quality movement, using its hind end well, etc., the top line is more acceptable to be more fitting for a horse that works cattle. And then ranch trail, kind of the same thing. Ranch trail, ranch riding, the patterns are getting very similar. Obviously, there's penalty points in ranch trail for hitting obstacles, where we don't see that in ranch riding, but patterns are pretty well similar. So same thing. We're a little bit more, I would say, lenient in the VRH, to a horse that has its ears up more, is a little bit more aware of the obstacles around them, and looks like a horse that would be competitive in the ranch cow and the ranch cutting, than just a pattern horse. And sometimes those horses, at the top level, sometimes those horses can make a drastic change from one event to the other. You might see them go in the ranch cow and look like a cow horse, and then come back in the ranch riding and look like a ranch rider. And that's a phenomenal athlete to be able to do that. And that horse will stand out and will get credited if it can drop its head and neck and look a little bit more flashy. But we are judging the ranch riding and ranch trail, as a all-around portion of this overall class. I almost try to think of VRH as one class, and a horse has strong suits and weak parts, in all 6 events. But what we're looking for is something that can, survive those ranch riding, ranch trail classes if they're not their strongest events, and then shine in the cow work, and vice versa. So there's some that, like I said, I'm saying this, there's some that are really strong in the ranch riding, but maybe not as strong in the cow work. And that is, that's kind of the cool thing about the all around, is they do have their strong suits, but there will be some horses that are strong in both. And, but what I guess I'm getting at is that there is a little bit more of a cow horse, vaquero type horse that fits these ranch riding classes maybe better than they do at the mainstream ranch events, where it's ranch riding, ranch trail, and ranch rail. Confirmation. So, I'd say confirmation exists. We're still kind of looking for that horse that has, it has 3 equal parts, the neck, the shoulder, and the hindquarters. You can divide that horse up into 3 equal parts, and you want to look for faults. If they're over in the knees, if they're pigeon-toed, cow-hocked, etc., we're judging for those faults. And then on breeding horses, we're judging for the parrot mouth, making sure stallions are descended. All those kind of proper traits on those studs and mares. But we're looking for a horse in that conformation that looks like it can, same thing like I just said in the ranch riding, it can go work a cow, it can do the ranch riding, it can do the reining. It's built for that. Obviously, a horse with more structure that does those things well is going to shine in the conformation than a very petite, more cutting type looking horse that's a little bit smaller. But at the end of the day, if they're proportionate, they're going to, and they're shown well. That's the other thing in the conformation, is that we show these horses to the best of their ability. I judge, and I've been in classes where conformation is kind of the stepchild of the 6 events, and people just stand out there in their rope halters and they don't set their horses up, or their horses don't trot and track well. And so as a judge, when I'm judging the conformation, I want to make sure that these horses are showing to the best of their ability as if they would be in the riding classes, and that helps me kind of sort them from top to bottom. Not completely, at the end of the day it's still a conformation class, but if they're well exhibited, that makes a huge difference, and it's easier to pick the top.
And Bryce, just a little plug. Bryce and West Coast Ranchers have a little project that's under the works right now, a book on how to show conformation effectively, because Bryce has studied that so that he can get better. Maybe you can tell them a little bit about how you kind of came to do that, and why you've started focusing on that a little bit more.
I'll be honest. I mean, about 5 years ago, when I started really diving into the VRH, I treated ranch conformation just like I just said not to. I didn't put a lot of thought into it. Half my horses didn't trot. I was trying to train them at the back gate to trot. They didn't know how to stand up and put their ears forward. And, you know, uh, in the last 3 years, I've gotten globes or multiple globes from the VRH world in the last 3 consecutive years. And those have been partially due to stepping up my game in the ranch conformation. I had an epiphany, and I went and sat at the World Show, and I went and watched a lot of the regular halter classes, and I watched how those guys showed their horses. And then I started paying attention to what they were doing the night before, and they were practicing like I was practicing any of my other events. They were going out into their, that World Show arena, and they were taking those halter horses out there. And I'm talking like, age gelding studs, 2-year-old studs, like the Jason Smiths and the Todd Grants, and those guys that I really look up to and respect. Gerald Jackson, there's a million names that I respect in the game of the halter horse industry, and they put a lot of time into it. And so I figured if it weighed equal, and it does, the conformation weighs just as equal as any of the other riding classes in this game. And so I started putting the time into it, and I started learning how to show these horses, teaching them how to set up, teaching them how to prop their ears up for sometimes an hour-long class, having a command that they put their ears up, to, and each horse is a little different. Every command's a little different. But starting to get these horses to where they show properly, and it's made a big difference. This year at the VRH World, every one of all my horses but one got a top 10 callback in the ranch conformation, whether it was the junior or the senior. And I did have the champion junior ranch conformation horse, and that actually led to being able to win the world in the VRH this year, I would say. I mean, without that ranch conformation win, that was a tight race. It came down to, small pencil points. I think we were within about 5 pencil points of who won that VRH Junior World Championship this year, just a few weeks ago in Amarillo. And without that confirmation first place, I don't think I would have been able to achieve that. So, but I put the time in, and actually taught that horse how to show that class. I've judged classes where people have let their horses lay down and roll, and it might be the most conformationally correct one. And at the end of the day, like I said, I've got to credit those conformationally correct ones. But if it's rolling when I go to watch it and look at it, that's going to be really hard for me to judge. And so, and almost impossible, I would say. But even to the fact of them just standing there asleep, and I get that it's a long, hard day at some of these horse shows, and the conformation is held last. Uh, and for me, I don't really think it necessarily matters as a judge if it's held at the beginning or the end. Some judges have a preference, or I'd sometimes rather it be kind of in the middle of the show or into the first day or something like that. But at the end of the day, if they're shown well, they're going to shine in that class.
Okay, and I think we'll move on because we have a slide for each one of the cattle and reining events. Does that work?
Okay. Yep. All right. So the ranch cow work, arguably, some people's my favorite class of the six. Some people love it. Some people hate it. Some people are intimidated by it. Some people are, that's what they shine the most in. So everybody kind of has their own kind of preference on it. But the rookies box, and it's they kick a single cow into the arena, and you box at the end of the arena that it's let out on.
And
If you
Bryce
want.
has provided some videos and we'll post those. And I know we already have a couple example videos up just so you have those.
Yep. So yeah, those will be good examples. I don't think I have really a bad example in there. They're all pretty good examples. They're mostly my clients or people that I have gotten permission from to use those videos. But the boxing, what we're judging that boxing on is, and that rookie boxing, youth and amateur, is we're judging for first thing that we judge is the approach. And for me, I want a calculated approach. I want an approach that fits that cow that comes out into that arena. And I want that horse and rider to, be aware of where the cow's at in the arena. That horse start to take a hold of that cow, show, honor that cow, and that cow honor that horse. And sometimes that cow won't, and will blow past that horse or put that horse in a bad situation. Then it's the judge's job to reward a new cow if it doesn't fit the situation, and if that horse is doing its job, and that cow doesn't, then like I said, it falls into that judge to reward a new cow. A judge can reward as many new cows as possible as needed, but generally speaking, after if you get blown 2 new cows, you can have a chance to let your horse air up and go at the end of the set. But I mean, most of these places, if it's quality facilities and quality cattle, we don't see that happen a whole lot. One new cow here and there is normal, but multiple new cows in a row is generally doesn't really happen. But sometimes it can. I saw it happen just a couple weeks ago, but it's not a regular thing. But then, like I said, so the approach. So that's the first and foremost thing. That's the thing we mark our scorecards first on is the approach, and then position. Are we working that cow in position? Are we in a position to make that cow move, go stop that cow? And then control kind of falls along there with position. We actually just recently split those 2 boxes up on the score sheets to give ourselves a further spread, but they're pretty similar in position and control. Degree of difficulty, and that's basically the cow score. If that cow's wild, that's going to give you that option to have a higher degree of difficulty. If that cow's numb, that's luck of the draw. You might have a lower score and degree of difficulty there. But if your horse handles that cow, you can give yourself some extra points there. Eye appeal is its own box, but I feel like if eye appeal applies to almost every portion of our score sheet. If we like something, we're obviously giving it eye appeal. So if we're giving heavy pluses to the other boxes, it's generally speaking, the eye appeal portion of it will be plussed accordingly as well. And I think I've about covered kind of the whole score sheet there. There's penalties like a miss, same as in cutting. If you have a clear miss, that's going to be a 1-point penalty. Working out of position, kind of the same thing. To me, that's like working out of position. Is I kind of use that penalty, that 1-point penalty, when there's kind of multiple misses in a row, and kind of just call that working out of position. Then giving them 3 1-point penalties back to back for misses. Actually, I think on the score sheet it's called loss of working advantage, but miss is the shortened version name of loss of working advantage. And
Lily told me the big news.
What's that? Oh, somebody's on mute.
Yeah, I think I muted him. You're good. I'm curious now.
What's big news? But no, that's kind of what we're looking for in the boxing. You know, I could dive into the scoring on this all day long, and I'll get more brief as we keep going. But you know, because that'd be a whole nother section on penalties and et cetera and everything else. But the boxing, what we're looking for is basically a rider that comes out there, controls that cow, works that cow, and drives it on the one end of the arena that it's let out on, but uses that space well. They can show drive, they can show they can stop that cow, and they show they can make that cow turn, and then shortening up that cow's distance as the time goes on, to where basically if they open that out gate at 50 seconds, that cow's squared up to where he leaves that out gate. That's ideal. And that kind of run will be rewarded for the rookies. Now we get into the limited cow work, which is box drive. You have a minute 45. You box on the side of the arena that the cow was let out on, and then you'll start your drive after you control the cow. You do not have to use the minute 45. I would say I actually submitted in one of my example videos is of one of my customers, Peyton, showing hot metallic cat, and she had, I think, 45 or 50 seconds left on the clock when she completed her run, and she won her limited box drive at the VRH World against 70 entries. So it's not fastest time wins, but it's definitely I would say a more controlled run, aggressive run, when you leave some time on that clock. Sometimes the cow doesn't allow for that, and I'm not saying that that's the goal of it, but basically what I'm trying to say is that you do not have to use your full time limit. You want to show control of that cow, box well on the far end, but once you have control, it's time to go. And then you want to drive away from the judges. Like I said, there's no penalty if you go down the side of the judges that the judges are sitting on. But if you do, remember, when you drive back, you have to drive back on that same side. You cannot switch back to the side that would have been the side you intended on. That would be getting the switching sides penalty. So you want to avoid that. Whatever side you come down on is the side you want to drive back on. But when you do get to that bottom end of the arena, the opposite end of where the cow was let out, you want to kind of show the same kind of box work as you did on the beginning. If you box down there for some time, box down on that side for some time. Try to make it somewhat symmetrical. And then try to have an intentional drive and drive back. And when you drive back past the center marker, the whistle will blow, and you will, be the time for the judges to mark their scorecards, and the run will be complete. If you don't get the cow down to this bottom end of the arena and the cow wraps around you and runs back across the middle line, that's going to result in an OP for doing so. And as soon as that cow crosses that middle line again, the whistle will blow. So when he crosses the center line for the second time, on your second drive back, whether it's intentional or not, the run is complete. And so a lot of people and sometimes some judges get a little confused in that part. I've seen that happen too. And sometimes it happens so fast it's really hard without a review system. But when that cow crosses back that middle line, then the run is complete, whether you intended it for it or not. And now, like I said, there's a million penalties and things like that we can get into. I mentioned the switching sides penalty. If there's any questions at all, I'd be happy to answer them via email or at the end of this. We'll go over any further questions. So jot those down if you have them, because there can be a lot of questions for that limited cow work portion.
And Bryce, I'm newer to the score sheets in that aspect, but can we share the score sheets? Are the penalties listed the same way that they are for the ranch riding and the ranch trail?
For the limited cow work?
Yeah, just for all of the cow work on the score sheets.
Yeah, do you have those, or
no? I'll post them for them though. I'll go into those if they're all listed there. Okay,
post
cool.
those. I always, as a judge, I try to make sure that I have a current scorecard, but all of my penalties are at the top of my scorecard. So when I'm going from association to association judging and all different things, I will look at the top of my scorecard and go over those those scores, sorry, those penalties, and make sure that they're fresh in my mind. So it's always good to have a fresh look at those. And I kind of treat the rule book a little bit like a huge helping hand in my program. I mean, I tell all my non-pros to study if there's a class they're maybe new to or they're nervous about doing, instead of me, having to, you know, try to give them a rundown like this. Sometimes it's easier for people to read. So I always have my non-pros read their rules before they go in that class if they're not completely sure of them. And then so now the fence work, that's the best class in this whole deal, in my opinion. Um, I think it really exhibits a ranch horse. I think it shows a horse has to be cali. I think it shows a horse has to run. And then for the open riders, it shows a horse that has to rope a strong, healthy yearling and stop it. And to me, that's what makes a ranch horse. I mean, if you can't go do that on them, then it'd be really hard to get a day's work done on the ranch. So having that must rope portion of the open is, I think, really important. I do think that it does kind of worry some people, but I think that's where rope handling skills and just entering the class a lot will help benefit of that. But it's a 3-minute time limit in the fence work, whether you're in the open, the youth, or the amateur. Amateur or youth have the option to rope or circle. Um, I think circling is personally harder from somebody who does the NRCHA and does the VRH. I can kind of take a little bit greener cow horse and get the job done roping a lot faster than I can circling. Circling's an art to get a horse to do, and so is roping, but it's more of the exhibitor's artistry than it is the horse learning that. And so for me, I feel like I can get kind of my greener set of horses through the roping portion a little bit easier. But if you miss in the open portion, it is a 3-point penalty on your first loop, um, and a 5-point penalty on your second loop. And if you lose your rope for not being able to dally, or you happen to somehow lose it if you were tied on, your saddle arm broke or something along those lines, then it would be an OP. And then the amateur and the youth, they have a little bit different penalties for missing. I believe it's a 1-point penalty for missing your first loop and a 3-point for missing your second. But refer back to your rule book on that. But I do know that there's a separate score sheet for the amateur and the youth because they do have different penalties for missing in the roping. But same thing, you box that cow until you have control. The longer you box, your degree of difficulty is going to kind of go down if it's unnecessary. Sometimes it's necessary to get even control of your cow to have a quality fence work. But if that cow is weak and you spend a minute boxing, then you're going to take the air out of that cow and your fence turns are going to be not as credit earning. Your fence turns, ranch cow, they're not as much of sticklers about being in, that real tight position that they want for the NRCHA. You can be a little wider and get credited. But when a horse does come in there and puts itself real tight to that cow and just paper thin squeezes by and that cow hits the brakes and it comes through that turn just like it's poetry in motion, it's going to be real hard to get around that horse. So sometimes you can play it safe a little bit and make sure that cow you get 2 good solid fence turns, or you can go for a third or a fourth. That's the other thing too, is you want to, if you're going to plan on circling, you want to make sure you do you're set up to go circle out of that last fence turn. So you're more than welcome to make more than one left turn or one right turn, or heck, more than one of each if it sets you up good to go circle. If you feel like that cow has too much air or you're just behind or something, get yourself up in a better position and keep making turns down that wall. Your first turn has to be by the middle marker. Then after that, there's no penalty for going ahead and getting by that cow and getting it turned. But if you get down into your corner markers, there's a 1-point penalty and then a 2-point penalty marker on the wall. Those will be taped off, and so you and yourself and the judges can see those. And it is where the cow turns, not your horse turns. So if your horse is slightly by the 1-point marker, but the cow never went by it, then it is not a penalty assessed. And so those are the kind of the things that are good to know before competing in this class. But other than, the fence turns are pretty much, just like, the portion of the NRCHA fence work or AQHA fence work in the working cow horse, except the open guys at that point in time pull up and they go rope. Now, I've seen it done both ways. I've seen riders really not stop their horse and just keep loping after that cow, building their loop. I personally take a second to build my loop. I feel like, the reason I do that mostly is I just ran past that cow twice. And so that cow is seeing me thinking about stopping generally. And so if I give him a second to air up, he's going to want to move away from me a little bit faster and give myself a good running rate and stop and hold on my roping portion. But if I keep chasing that cow and keep him loping and keep him moving, I'm going to take air out of him that I'm going to wish I had when I go to try to line him out and rope him. So that's why I personally pull up and let that cow get a breath, and my horse get a breath as well. It's just literally a breath, but it kind of calms things down and then reset the run up for that portion. And there's no penalty for loss of working advantage or anything like that for taking that second to build your loop. So I think we've about covered kind of those portion there. Yep. So now the ranch cutting, that's another fun event, a little different than herd work at the NRTHA shows, and the fact of the matter that it's 2 minutes, 2 cows. So, it's 2.5 minutes in the NRCHA, and you must work until the buzzer goes off. But in the class of ranch cutting, you maximum.
Sorry, guys, we'll work to get him back. Just a second. Okay, guys, I just talked to Bryce. It'll be probably a couple minutes. His computer just decided to die. So they're getting back up and going. So sorry for the interruption, but it'll be probably a couple minutes. In the meantime, if you guys have any questions about, let me actually move on. He'll keep explaining once he gets on, but let's move on to, we do have a VRH clinic coming up. It's on July 17th from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. is the first session. And then the second session is from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And this is with Roy Rich. This is where the show is going to be located at. Our first show, the 18th and 19th show, will be there. And so Roy will be working with small groups, and he'll have his assistant trainers helping him as well. And the clinic focus will be on ranch cutting, ranch cow work, and ranch reining. And then also he's totally open. He's a world champion in his own right in the ranch riding. And so and very good at the ranch trail as well. So he's willing to help participants with that as well, depending on the rider's goals. So this is a perfect opportunity if you're new to the VRH classes to not only get with somebody that can really help you through those classes, the cattle and the reining classes, but also has a lot of experience in the ranch riding and ranch trail as well. So he's excited to do that and help people that are new to the VRH or even need some tune-up in those areas. And feel free during. Are we back or?
I'm back. I'm here.
Okay, great. Okay, I just did my little commercial while you were coming back, and then I'll mute and let you go back. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. So we'll get back to the cutting slide here. There we go. All right. So yeah, so the difference kind of, like I said, between the herd work and this is it's 2 minutes and then maximum 2 head. You still want to get at least one deep cut. That is required, and you need to cut 2 cows. I see that happen a lot, and some rookie classes and things like that. is, somebody, they really took their time on their first cut and now they're taking their time on their second cut and the buzzer goes off and they do not get 2 cows cut, and that would be an OP. And so that you want to avoid. You want to make sure you get your 2 cows cut, but you do need to have at least one deep cut. But let's just say, like, you do get your cows cut in a very timely manner, and your first cut was good, and your second cut's going really well, and if you were at the NRCHA show, you would have had the option to go make your third cut, and that cow is a lot of cow maybe, and you don't want to try to risk it and go to the end of the run all the way to the buzzer, and you have 10 seconds left. You can get off that cow as long as you get off legal. And what I mean by legal is without a hot quit. That cow has to be turned away from you or standing solid on all 4 feet. And good turn back guys, people like Roy in your area, if you have them and his crew out there, or some other good professionals out there, they'll kind of somewhat coach you and to when to get off a cow or next chance or something like that of when that cow turns away, because they read cattle well, and they'll help you in that situation. I haven't met a herd holder or turn back guy that didn't use his voice well to help others. I feel like there is in AQHA guidelines, coaching from the sidelines is in excessiveness is prohibited. In the cutting, I feel like it's pretty well accepted. Don't feel like you're going to get disqualified if somebody gives you some advice from the sidelines, or even if you cut that first cow and when the herd was settling, you had the red cow and then the black baldy picked to cut, and now when you're walking back in the herd, you don't see that black baldy, and I'll communicate with my herd holders. I'll say, hey, do you see that black baldy? I can't find him, and they'll tell me where he is, and I'll try to go seek him out. And so those are kind of uh, you know tidbits that I feel like some people think they can't talk when they're in that show pen, and I don't try to spend too much time talking. I try to spend more time showing, but I'll use my help out there to my kind of advantage. We're all on the same team out there, and to me, that's really not coaching from the sidelines. They're out there in that arena with you. Um, and then kind of what are we looking for in the cutting? From a judge's point of view, the ability of a horse to work a cow and separate it from the herd and hold it is what it says right here, and that's 100% correct. And you want to make sure that same thing, you don't have any penalties, any misses, any switches, things like that. Those will all be things you can read about in your rule book, or if you put something online that has easy access to. And then, like I said, if there's any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them via email and go into depth with that. But kind of stay out of your penalty boxes. The run is one in the middle. I've always believed that. So try to cut that cow in the middle of the pen. Don't get to running from side to side. It's not a penalty for doing that. It's not completely always working out of position. Sometimes that cow calls for you to go use your whole entire arena space. But if you can try to cut cattle and read cattle and cut there's no rerun in ranch cutting. There's no that cow is too much, I should have got a new cow. That's not the case, because in cutting you've got 20 some out there to pick from, and so it's your call to pick cattle that fit you and your horse, and that's easier said than done. And that's something that I think we all struggle with, even at the highest level of the open, is trying to read cattle from a fresh set, and what you expect them to do sometimes is completely different from what they do. But that's where the kind of having those professionals on your team that help you pick cattle and help you identify cattle that fit you and your horse will kind of keep you out of those bad situations the best you can, and you learn from your mistakes and you go on and you try to keep learning how to read cattle, and it's a never-ending process to learn that. But that's there. Like I said, I just want to mention there is no new cows in cutting. That's your choice to cut that particular cow. All right, the reining. I would say this is about as close to rein work in the NRCHA as it comes. I mean, I think a real tough open class is, judged pretty equivalent. I will say that there's less non-pros doing the VRH than there are in the NRCHA organization. So those non-pro levels get a little bit more maybe lenient or not as competitive. But I would say that the ranch training is they're looking for a kind of a reined cow horse type of horse to go in there and lay down that ranch training pattern. They're not wanting something with its head below its knees. I've actually seen a run that I thought was extreme quality, and they called it over bridled. There's a 1 point penalty per maneuver for being over bridled in this, and that would be a lot of the reiners at the top level. And so it's a hard penalty to call. I've only ever seen it called one time from a judge's point of view at a big event, but having a horse that fits that kind of bridle style of horse, you can show this event as well as any other VRH event in split reins or in Rommel reins or two-handed on a junior aged horse. I believe two-handed in the rookie for any aged horse, but two-handed has to be in a snaffle or a hackmore. But you're not stuck to Rommels like you would be on a bridle horse in our CHA reining, but kind of same kind of standard here. There's it's in the teens now, I believe, but there's 10 to 13 patterns that VRH can use. They're in the AQHA rule book. They're not all 100% working cow horse type patterns. Some of them, the turnarounds are in the center like it would be for the reining, where most in our CHA patterns, your turnarounds are at the end of your stops. But most of them, I would say, kind of mimic in our CHA or our AQHA working cow horse type of pattern. The difference I would say that lies in reining versus the ranch riding and the ranch trail is, ranch riding and ranch trail is kind of, I would say, movement and quality. Obviously need to stay on pattern, but accuracy is kind of the last kind of deciding factor in ranch riding and ranch trail. You can be a little bit inaccurate. There's a lot of times there's not actual measured spots for walkovers, so you can put a double split step in one if it fits your horse better, etc. Sometimes there's measurements and they tell you it has to be exact, but a lot of times in ranch riding, if the patterns say if it fits your horse, do a bigger loop, or if it fits your horse, do a smaller, tighter loop, do that. Where in the reining, I would say this in VRH, this is the one event where accuracy matters. So you have to hit the middle marker when you're doing your circles. You have to do your lead change in the middle. You have to get by your markers and your stops, whether that's the middle marker on some patterns or your end marker on some patterns. And if you don't, penalties will be assessed and for not being 100% accurate. And then, so that's what I tell my customers is you will place good and stay in the running for the all around if you are accurate. And then how kind of competitive the class is going to, then the eye appeal comes in, then the intensity behind the maneuvers comes in, and all those other things come into play. But first and foremost, accuracy is the number one thing in this, and that's where I feel like then in VRH and the events I've judged and watching a lot of the VRH go is, if back to kind of like the halter, putting the time in and stuff like that, if you make sure that you hit middle and your lead changes are exact and you get by your end markers. I mean, it's actually, there's a great right here. It says in judge's evaluation, judged on ability to perform an exact pattern. And that's where I'm coming from with the word accuracy. And now smooth and finesse, that's kind of eye appeal to me. That's the second most important thing. If that horse moves to your standards, you like the way it moves, it's an easy flowing pattern, everything looks good, then back to this TV that keeps turning on you. But then, attitude, yeah, to me, that's just kind of that horse having a lot of expression, ears forward, kind of just looks like it's in there, pleasant to be in there, but aware of its situation. Doesn't look dopey, doesn't look heavy, just looks like it's in there and it's kind of looking for a cow to come out. If there was one coming out at it, because it is at the end of the day, these are cow horses. They should be ready for that cow. Quickness, what I'm kind of referring to with quickness is foot speed. Can that horse turn around faster and controlled, and look pleasant and have good foundation to that turn, but with quickness, that's going to help elevate that score than a horse that turns around quickly or turns around correct, but maybe not as quick with his feet. And then controlled speed, the faster you run, if it's controlled, the higher degree of difficulty.
And I just threw this one in. I know you've covered this a little bit,
Yep.
but I thought it was interesting when I was going through the rule book that they must compete in at least 2 riding classes in that division to be eligible. Sometimes we have people that just come and try to show the conformation. I just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, no, that's a great point right there. They must do 2 riding classes. Now, you can do ranch riding, ranch trail with this. Now, when we start, and I'm sure we'll dive into this on another slide, but I'm going to dive into it right now a little bit. But to obtain AQHA points in this, you're competing against the other all-around eligible competitors at that show to that judge. And so, like, what I mean by that is to be all-around eligible, you must do the conformation class, 1 riding class, and 1 cow class. Now, to be considered an entry. Now, if 5 people do those 3, or somehow make a combination of the 1 conformation class, a 1 riding class, and 1 of the 2 cloud classes, and they do at least 3 classes, and 1 of them is in each division, or 1 of them is in each kind of discipline, I guess I should say, then they're making themselves and their horse all around eligible. And what I see happen a lot at these shows is people will come enter the versatility ranch horse ranch riding, and that ranch riding might get 30, 40 people. But the combination of people that enter the conformation, the ranch riding, and then a cow class is generally only 5 or so people, sometimes even 3, sometimes even 1, that do that. And so, like I actually kind of had a horse that conformation was his strongest suit. He actually had some conformation blood, haltered bloodlines in him, but to make him, conformation eligible, and he had to do the 2 riding classes. I actually never went to a show and entered him in just ranch riding or ranch trail. He was not a cow horse. He was actually a terrible cow horse. But what we did was we put him in that cow class, and we put him in that cow class, and we put him in a ranch riding class, and then we put him in the conformation, and that is going to help that show. It's going to help the organization. It's going to help the competitor who is competitive for the all around gain those points. It's going to help your peers is what it's going to do. And so that's where I'm an advocate to, if you can, if it's safe for you and your horse, do a cow class, do a conformation class, and do at least 1 of the riding classes if you're not going to do the full all around, because then at least you're an all around eligible participant and you're adding entries to that all around eligible class, and you're building those numbers in that class to hopefully get it to a 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, etc., which in turn will keep organizations like West Coast Ranch Horse able to keep hosting these VRH shows. But you are allowed to do ranch riding, ranch trail, and conformation. That is not against the rules, but I'm an advocate for at least throwing that cow class in there to make yourself all around eligible. Here's our divisions open. It's open to anybody. If you don't, I guess I shouldn't say that. You can show as a non-pro rider, a amateur rider. You can show the amateur and open, I believe, at the same horse show on the same horse. but you must own that horse or have a family member that does so. That's the only way you can cross enter um, um, open and amateur, and I believe you can do it in the regular youth and the open as well for the same reason. If you own the horse or a family member owns the horse.
Yes, I will verify that. We do that kind of frequently.
But cowboy must be employed by a working ranch, and y'all don't offer that, but if you were to go to one that does, that's kind of the rule there. And then amateur is that's the kind of the highest end of it. But here's the kind of the catch is as a limited amateur, if you want to try amateur at one of these shows, you're allowed to. You're allowed to come and go from limited amateur in the box drive to amateur as you please. You just cannot do it at the same show on the same horse or even on a different horse. Once you commit to being a limited amateur or an amateur at that horse show, you're stuck to that division for the rest of that horse show. And then next month you can change. Rookie amateur is limited to 10 points or $500. And then there is something about your horse. If your horse had too many points in the open or lifetime, world championships and stuff like that, there's a cap to the horse you're riding's rookie eligibility, and just contact AQHA and run that registration number against that. And they'll be able to tell you if your horse is VRH rookie eligible or not. Same
Hey,
in
Bryce,
you.
is there a leveling report for the VRH the same way for the regular AQHA?
A lot harder to find if there
Okay.
is.
Okay.
A lot of calling to just the show department at AQHA to get that figured out. It's kind of always my go-to. I've even got some cell phone numbers at some horse shows now there where I can just quickly call and not have to be on the phone with AQHA for a long time, trying to get passed around. But that's how frequent I call to help people out. And some, not even just my program, anybody that asks me, I'm always trying to kind of make sure they're in the right division. So it, like I said, helps the show out, helps everybody out, and make sure they're entered in the right stuff. But calling's probably your best way to cross-reference a lot of that stuff. And then, but yeah, the open, you must rope in the cow work. You go down the fence in the cow work. And then amateur, same thing. You can rope or circle, but it is a fence class. Limited amateurs, box drive. Rookie amateur is boxing. And then same thing in the youth. You can rope or circle. Limited box drive. Rookie is boxing.
And hey, there was one thing that I forgot to mention on the last slide. It is the halter, like, because you were saying you're married to that division. But I think I put in here, maybe it wasn't in here, maybe it's on a different slide. But that you can, exhibitors may show more than one horse, which
yes
is not a regular AQHA rule, right?
No. So if you're kind of where you don't have you have 2 or 3 horses entered, whether it's the open, anything else, you can have catch leaders. And for the open, they do not need to own that horse. They can be your loper. They don't even have to have an AQHA card. They just are taking your place and leading that horse in that class for you. A lot of times, I actually have been at a horse show where the back gate person wants to change the exhibitor. Don't let them. You're still the exhibitor. You just have a catch leader leading that horse in there. Like I said, I have had people do it that are like, I've literally had the back gate people do it before. Like I've just had people lead my horses in there at these smaller shows to get them shown. Now in the amateur or the youth class, it's frowned upon for an open exhibitor to go lead your horse in there. So find somebody in that division or a lower division or a family member. Like I said, they don't even have to have an AQHA card. If they could get one because it helps the organizations, but they're just leading in your place, but it does look kind of frowned upon if a professional goes into a youth class or an amateur class leading your horse. So they kind of frown upon that, but not that I haven't seen it done before, but they're just taking your place. And as far as that goes, now going back to the halter one more time.
Oh, sorry.
No, yeah. Excessive white is something I want to touch on here. It's in there, just like it's in performance halter. A lot of these horses might not be stamped excessive white that have excessive white. The ranch conformation is where you're going to get caught with that crime. And there's a lot of double registereds that, as they've gotten, they maybe were registered as a double registered, they had enough white to go into the paint association, although they're quarter horse bloodlines. But as maybe their yearling pictures, they didn't look like they had that much white, but as they grew, those belly spots got bigger, or that kind of thing. And the TV off again. And that belly spot got bigger, or that spot in that area got bigger, or across the back of their jaw, something like that. And now the horse really does have excessive white. And like I said, it might have gone a long time without getting caught, might have shown in a few ranch conformations without it being an issue. But then you get that one judge, all he has to do, or she, is put on his official placings that get submitted to AQHA that he believes that the horse has excessive white. He will place that horse, and he might put it below some other horses because of its excessive white and his offense to it having too much white. But if it goes to AQHA and it gets investigated and you are asked to submit in pictures and stuff, you very well could get that horse stamped excessive white and be removed from being able to show ranch conformation in VRH, because a excessive white horse cannot show ranch conformation in VRH. And when that happens, you'll have that particular show that it got caught at will have to go back and make adjustments to its placings, as well as going forward, that horse can show VRH, but it will never be all around eligible because it cannot do the conformation. All right, your VRH points, individual class points, AQHA point chart based on number of horses. I don't really know how that benefits anybody or any horse, because those don't actually go on anybody's record. I do know they're given, they go somewhere, but they don't get transferred. They stay as VRH points, even though they follow that point scale in the individual classes, but they never get transferred over, like I said, to the actual hard copy record of that horse when you go and pull its points for, its performance record. So they're kind of just like these weird ghost points that just kind of float around that don't really count for much of anything.
And Bryce, it doesn't count against you for L1 amateur or L1 youth eligibility, right? For the regular AQHA ranch riding?
I believe not. Like I said, I believe they're just floating points that people come just to say they got some points. But like I said, when you go to pull that horse's performance record, those aren't there for the VRH ranch trail that you did, just the ranch trail. Like they just stay in this little column of VRH credited points. But like if that horse's black type pedigree ever got pulled to go into a sale, something like that, those points don't actually transfer over. Like I said, VRH is kind of a sister organization to AQHA, so they kind of just stay in VRH. They don't actually get transferred over to actual AQHA points. Just like, it kind of falls under that. So yeah, you can come say you got some points on your horse, but they're kind of just bragging right points more than anything, I would say, those individual class points. Now, all around an open, cowboy, amateur, limited amateur, and rookie amateur. All around awarded. Sorry, I read that wrong. So there's we award the all around. It's kind of the show's place to give prizes, things like that for that. A lot of times, if there's double judge, it's kind of the combination of the two gets the prize. If you per judge, you'll get an email from AQHA asking if you want to order the trophy that they make you pay for if you win an all around at a show. But some people like that, and I ordered my first one. It's pretty cool to have there. But so there's some kind of awards there. But as far as points go, like I said, back to that when we talked about the halter, That's where your actual hard copy points come from the VRH. They get transferred into your horse's record and for qualifying. And those points, you have to have the competitors in that class that are also all around eligible with you, which consists of doing one cow class, one conformation class, and one riding class, whether it's reining, trail, or ranch riding. And so, you might go to the show and there'd be 30 ranch riders, and then there's only 10 in the cow work in your division, and then there's only 3 in the halter. Well, if those 3 were with you in the rest of those classes, it's only a half point per judge horse show, although there was 30 in the ranch riding. So like I said, try to stay in that race. And then like same thing for your peers. Maybe you were in the all around and that was your point, but you lost a cow in the cutting and now you want to leave before the halter's over. That's one thing that I never let my non-pros do on me is not show that halter class, because even if they're not the one winning it, they're helping that organization and their peers by being all around eligible. And if they skip that halter class, it takes them out of that count for that, and then it'll lower the points. It is based on a 1 horse, 1 rider combination. Halter, like I said, you're not changing the exhibitor, so it stays true to that. But what that means is in the open, you can't put a cow horse guy on it in the cow events, and then you do the ranch riding. You have to stay together in those riding classes. And then out of the all around entries, we first place in every class. And these are what I call pencil points. These 50 points don't go on any record. They're not points you get to say you got on your horse. They're just for basically the office to help pencil the points together for the all around. First gets 50, 50th would get 1 point if it had that many in the class. Now say there's only 10 in the class. If you do the cutting and you're last, you're going to take 40 points out of that class. So that's what forces you to do every class in the all around to stay in the race for the all around. Because if you skip a class and there's only 10 kind of entries in your, say, your limited amateur division, and you skip that class, you're going to be a whole section of points, whole group of points behind the rest of the field, even if it wasn't your best class. I actually had a good friend of mine at his first VRH show at the Fort Worth Stock Show. I think he won every class he went in, but he didn't do the cutting because he didn't think his horse was a good cutter. And he comes up to me, he's like, but I was, everybody else was all over the place. How can just being out of the top 10 in the one, not here in the one event be any different than being out of the top 10 in it? I'm like, well, because this is the scale. Used to be, I think 6 years ago, it was a 10 through 1 scale. So then you could skip a class and still be alive. Now you can't, and that's why they did this, is to keep the entries up in every single class and have you do every class on that horse rider combination. Pretty self-explanatory. Exhibitor horse combination with the highest point total wins each division. Team eligible if completes in at least 1 cattle class, at least 1 non-riding class, and that's confirmation. That's what I mean. Like that's that all-around eligibility deal, and that's what I mean. Help your peers, help your organization. You will not embarrass yourself, especially through this. This is fine to go in those cow classes if they're not your strong suit. It is fine to go in a pattern class if it's not your strong suit, and it's fine to go in the confirmation if it's not your strong suit. You'll get better by doing it. But to keep VRH alive, we've got to try to show these horses in the all around. Otherwise, the points don't help, and we want to get these West Coast ranch horse shows to be in some of the top VRH shows in the country, and we can't do that without people competing in the all around. So qualifying for the VRH World held in Amarillo every June. Probably one of the coolest events we have. I would say for the entry fee money to the payouts is unreal. I mean, it's less than $2,000 to enter your entire all around. That includes cattle fees, and then I think the junior all around paid close to $10,000 this year. So I mean, for what it pays to what it costs to enter. It's very affordable in this day and age in horse showing compared to some other horse shows. Your qualifying period is January 1st through the 31st. And that kind of is a little funny because that's where it's a little different than AQHA. Usually AQHA, cuts their qualifying off 3 months before their world show. So July 31st for an October world show is what the qualifying is in AQHA. But in VRH, we use the calendar year, the year prior. And so you'll be in, Fort Worth Stock Show, January 15th of 27, and you'll be qualifying for June of 28. So that's a long time. And so a lot can happen in between there, but that's kind of how the period works and for that organization. And then you can get your points to qualify. That is, I think it's like 2 points in the senior, 1 point in the junior, all around points, not individual class points. Or you can do the all around 2, 3, or if you're doing individual events, that's also fine. You can do the to 3 judges. That's different than AQHA. AQHA is 4 different shows traveling to 4 different events. In VRH, it's 3 judges. So West Coast Ranch Horse offers 2 double judge shows. So just through y'all's organization, y'all can get qualified for the 2027 World Show in Amarillo, just by showing the all around to those judges. You can, like I said, if you're all around eligible, you can just do the confirmation, the ranch riding, and the cow class. And you may have not ever even entered the ranch trail at your qualifiers. But since you did, because you were all around eligible and showed to 2 judges and then showed to the other 2 judges, total of 4, then you're ready for those other events by the following June. You can gear yourself to doing those events because you'll be qualified for them because you're an all-around qualified entry, even though you didn't necessarily maybe do every event, but you stayed all-around qualified and all-around eligible.
And Bryce, so in the chat, I put some links before we started, and one of those links is the VRH qualifying point. So if you wanted to look at the individual, amount of points you would have to get to qualify, you can click on that link there in the chat.
Perfect. Yeah, because I don't know those completely off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's why I put that there. And then I also have the link to the VRH World Show website so that you can look at it. Right now, it's the information from 2026's World Show, but you can go and look there. I also link the rule book if you want to read up on some of the stuff that we're talking about. So there's some links in there for you.
Perfect. And then ranching heritage finals, check your horse's papers. That's the way to know if they're ranching heritage. There'll be a little emblem on there that looks like a little cowboy riding a horse at the very center bottom of your papers. And you'll be amazed at how many horses are ranching heritage eligible that people don't know what that is. And that is basically a breeder that's been a breeder for, I think, a decade, a recognized breeder breeding 8 or more foals per year. That's main income is cattle ranching and ranching of some kind. And those breeders are oftentimes the 4-6s, the late center ranch, the list goes on and on. But there's a lot of local breeders that fit that criteria too, and they're ranching heritage eligible, and those horses are. And that's a great event. There's money out the wazoo from that. The ranches donate to that. There's even multiple yearlings every year are donated to the youth of AQHA that do this scholarship program where they're awarded this colt and they keep up with its progress in hopes of being the winner with that foal to receive the scholarship. And if they don't receive the scholarship, they still retain the rights to the foal. We actually, my brother actually did that, and I actually would say that's probably our entire introduction into this whole ranch horse world was through that program, the Ranching Heritage Program. So we have a lot of ties to that. And I'm not a ranching heritage breeder, but I'm probably one of the biggest advocates for those events. Pueblo, Colorado, Sun Circuit, Fort Worth Stock Show, they all offer ranching heritage challenges. And those, like I said, they all have great added money at every one of the challenges that's brought through the ranches and that's given, offered through the ranches. And then the finals has a substantial amount of money. And it's not just for VRH events. There's barrel racing, there's heading, heeling, breakaway, steer stopping. So there's some other events other than the what's offered and kind of the VRH lineup available too. So, if your spouse or somebody has a rope horse and happens to be ranching heritage, then it's a double whammy. You get it qualified in the roping while you get your horse qualified for the versatility and go out to Amarillo, and it's a two birds, one stone, as well as the level one cattle championships. That's just like the level one East and West, but this is the cattle championships. It's central. It's held in Amarillo with this event. So they'll have the cutting, they'll have the working cow, the boxing, they'll have, they'll have the ranch riding, the ranch trail, as well, all offered for level one. And you can do that there as well, and you can do the VRH and the level one championships if you're level one eligible. You can enter up in all of it if you want to on the same horse. Here's some notes, important notes. You can't show 2-year-old. I think that's true to any ranch event, even outside of VRH. They have to be 3 years old to be shown. In VRH, ranch reining and ranch cow work can be held together or held separately. That's show management's decision. It is a separate class though. So if it's held together and you just want to do ranch cow and you don't want to do ranch reining, you'll be in the draw as just a ranch cow entry. And you'll just, when they call you in, you'll just trot in there and ask for your cow. I say trot, you can lope or you can walk. Like, you do not have to do, it's not a lameness exam going down there. You can lope in for, looks like it's a run-in pattern. Run down there and stop and call for your cow. However you get to that end of the arena where you want to deem necessary to call for your cow is your decision. Where reining or any of the other events, you need to do what the pattern tells you to do. But the ranch cow or any of the cow classes don't really have a set pattern.
And at the WCRH, VRH shows, we will be holding them separately.
Okay, so that'd be just like that. Getting to the cow is your decision. A lot of people trot. That's kind of my go-to, is to trot in there. I'll sometimes post the trot, extend the trot in there. Sometimes I'll sit the trot. Just kind of whatever feels right for that horse to be most prepared for that cow to come out of that into the arena. But I have seen people run down there and stop and call for their cow. Just have a lot of kind of confidence in that. And sometimes that person that was before you has a long ways to walk back and their horse is gassed. And so if you trotted down there, you'd be sitting there for a while. So sometimes it's appropriate just to walk down there and call for your cow. And that gives that other person time to get out of the arena if that gate person's not kind of making you wait on them in first place. Ranch riding, and ranch trail may be combined and held at the same time or separately. Generally, if you're going to run kind of a neat pattern, you're going to have to run them separately. But I've seen some shows try to kind of consolidate on time, and when they run them together, it is still 2 separate patterns. It is still 2 separate score sheets, but they're just putting a pattern on top of a pattern that fits. So generally the trail pattern kind of is in the middle of the arena, and then they'll use one of the very simple ranch riding patterns that just uses the perimeter. And when you finish the trail, you'll let the judge flip score sheets, get to their ranch riding score sheet. They'll flag you for your ranch riding. And basically that just saves kind of time. I would say that more than saving time during the day, it allows you to knock that ranch riding and trail out and let that cow pin take precedence a lot of times if you're running 2 arenas at a horse show. And then really consolidating actual time, which at the end of the day will speed the horse show up when you let that cow pin have the most time necessary, and you're not having to wait on conflicts. AQHA and VRH ranch trail can run together. Ranch riding needs to be special permission from AQHA. So what that means, and I've been to horse shows where this has been kind of a conversation, but AQHA, VRH ranch trail, I don't think they need, and like I said, I'm pretty confident, I don't think, but, and this is all show management kind of decisions and things, but they can run that ranch riding and ranch trail simultaneously from the AQHA portion and the VRH portion, run them together. What that does though is it puts the limited amateur with the novice amateur or level one amateur AQHA. And so then if you are trying to do regular amateur and limited amateur VRH, regular amateur AQHA and limited amateur VRH, you're still going to have to do two separate runs at that show and not let your concurrent one go, because your concurrent one would technically go with the level one. And if you're not level one eligible, that's fine. You just won't be entered in that division. You'll just be doing your VRH limited, which you never can level out of. And then you would have to later on do your AQHA regular amateur for qualifying points or show count for the November World Show.
And that's actually an important distinction, because West Coast Ranch Horse has amateur limited, which is you've won 5 or less blue ribbons. It's kind of an introductory loping class for the amateurs. And so that's not to be confused with the limited amateur VRH, which is, like you said, no point cap, no money cap. It's just you don't want to go down the fence. And so so that's why we don't run those together, because they're really not the same.
No, and you'll never, like I said, like you're using the word limited for kind of like you said, a point cap or a money cap, or an amount of times you've entered cap, where not the same case in VRH. VRH, the word limited really just needs to be changed. Not changed, it's not my business, but it basically translates to box drive box is what it translates to.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's that. And then amateur and youth exhibitors may only show in one subdivision with the same horse. Example, choose amateur limited or rookie amateur. I think we talked about that a little bit today already, but once you kind of choose your division for that show, that month's show, then you're kind of stuck to it. You can't decide that you want to switch for after the confirmation out of the amateur and into the limited am, or something like that. You got to stick with it, whatever one you decided to enter that horse show, that's the one you're with. It is not just the same horse. You cannot, as a rider, this another 99.9% sure kind of statement. I don't think you can choose to show Sally and Bo, show Sally in the amateur and Bo in the limited amateur. I think once you choose as an exhibitor which division you're going to be in, that's your division for that weekend.
Okay.
AQHA.
We already covered this on the break. And then I have show bill here. I'm sure you guys have all seen this already. And then I wanted to call out that we do have additional divisions that are all breed divisions. So we have green horse, that a horse that's been showing 2 years or less in cow horse or VRH types of events. And then we have green and grass, and this is meant for those exhibitors that it's their first time showing VRH. And you can continue to show in that, for the series. But this is intended for first time exhibitors in the VRH classes. And then we have an intro to cutting class. One of the hardest parts about cutting from experience is cutting the cow out effectively. And so I've seen where the novices will just cut out and quit. And so we have a class like that for you if you're a real novice at cutting, but you still want to do it.
Perfect.
Okay. And then now, maybe some of you have been waiting for this opportunity. Now, Bryce is yours for any questions that you have, or if you have any questions just about the show in general. So just take yourself off of mute and go ahead. Any questions?
This is Sharon. I do. I'll go first.
Perfect.
And hopefully it's not too dumb of a question. Just thank you guys for doing this today.
No, you're very welcome.
So I am completely new to the VRH or any type of ranch riding or any of that. I compete in a completely different discipline. I know you mentioned that there could be an issue for AQHA if, like, I have horses, cutters that have carryover for NCHA, that they've had that since futurity years. They're older now. Is that going to prohibit me from being able to ride in the beginner or the rookie class at this upcoming show?
That's where I refer back to put that phone call into AQHA,
Okay.
as that is That's a hard one because I actually didn't even realize I was kind of in a similar boat with a horse. It was from AQHA earnings, but it was a horse I was involved in as an agent on a sale, and the rider that was purchasing the horse was rookie eligible, and we get all the way down to basically transaction, and that horse is not a rookie eligible horse, and so. That was before I had it in my program, and all those kinds of things. And so then they were just doing their diligence like I'm telling you to do now by calling AQHA and asking that question, run that registration number against VRH rookie eligibility, and make sure that horse is rookie eligible.
Okay, and then Jenny, are you going to mirror for the West Coast, the 2 rookie classes, the same eligibility for the VRH?
Let me look at the show bill. Are we offering? I don't think we're off. So it's yes. So
it'd
we
be
will
like,
have to follow AQHA rules for that. And we don't have an all breed class. So yes, it'll be whatever your AQHA eligibility is. And I'm looking it up in the rule book. I said I told Bryce I was going to do this before the webinar, but I didn't get to it. But I'll look it up in the rule book and share it with you guys.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is a kind of on registration again. So if I have a green as grass rider horse, but I've been riding in amateur limited. So if I register for green as grass on Saturday, will that transfer over into the amateur limited on Sunday, or how's that going to work?
I'm going to post how the high point buckles are going to calculate. I'm not quite sure yet exactly how they'll match up, but I'll post that. I would say probably by tomorrow. It's one of my next tasks.
Okay, so before we have to register,
yeah, I'll get it up by the morning.
Okay,
I think green as grass is going to pair up with green rider. But I'll take a look at that because it could also include the amateur limited.
Yeah, because I know I'm not a green rider, so
yeah, well, I think it would be appropriate then for green as grass to match up with amateur limited and the green rider.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, of course. And we are offering buckles in multiple divisions, and like I said, I'll post those tomorrow so that you're aware before you have to enter what classes count for what buckles.
And then the other thing we talked about before the webinar was in the case that we don't reach the number of entries we want for the cattle registration, the cutting, it's obviously it's kind of double, one horse for every 2 cows is kind of what you're shooting for. So getting those cattle reservations for the cutting, you have to kind of register for more cattle than you are horses, and sometimes that's kind of hard on a horse show. And so if there's not the appropriate amount of cutting entries to cow work entries or whatever, as a show committee, you are allowed to basically if you wanted to, what I'm trying to say is if you didn't want to offer the cutting because there wasn't enough pre-entries, you could still hold that cow work and still be an all-around show because you're still offering one cow class. And so that's something too. So don't be alarmed if for whatever reason there's not enough entries to have the cutting, that you will still be getting qualified, as this will still be recognized as a all-around eligible show for the judges and for points. You just won't have that cutting class to show in, but it won't affect the all-around race. It'll still be 50 points per offered class, etc.
But Bryce highlights something that's very important to producing these shows, which is the cattle fees and the need to get your cattle fees in tomorrow to make sure that we can offer all of the classes that are on our show bill. Because if we get all the entries in and we do an evaluation and we can't offer cutting, then unfortunately, we're not going to take a loss so that we can buy cattle for everyone to cut. So we're kind of all this in this together, and you need to reserve your cattle ahead of time. And then as long as we have the entries, we're a complete go. But to Bryce's point, if we're not, we might have to scale that back and just offer the boxing or the cow work. So that's really important, and I keep posting, and hopefully you guys get your entries in and your cattle's reserved, or your cattle reserved. And for this show, the cattle need to be reserved by tomorrow. So at 5 p.m. is the deadline, and then we will charge your cattle fees at that time. and those are non-refundable unless, of course, we have to cancel the show for some odd reason. And then your entries will be due 2 days before the start of the show. So I believe that is the 16th at 11:59 p.m. And then those don't get charged until the end of the show, just like usual. But the cattle fees are a little bit different for these shows. And then I saw a question from Megan Shigo, and she's asking the greenest grass. There, you notice that there's less time for those classes, and that's more of an introductory class. So, it is kind of hard to get one cut out and cut it. So we give you more time, for when you're a beginner, we give you 1 cow, 1 minute, 30 seconds. And then the same thing for green horse. So just sort of an intermediate between cutting one out, the cut and quit versus the having to work 2 in 2 minutes. You're welcome. What else? Anybody else have questions? Okay, I'm gonna say going once, going twice. All right, so as Bryce mentioned, unless anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand. But you can communicate with us. We can get any questions to Bryce. Bryce, if you want to give your email, you mentioned that a couple times.
Yeah. Just do, I'll be easier for me to check. Do my personal email is bryce.briggs@yahoo.com. Those questions can be sent there, and I can email you back as quickly as possible if there's anything that refers to that, or if I need to, if it's a question I can't answer. Like I said, I've got some contacts within AQHA and VRH that are happy to answer these questions and keep building VRH as a entity, and especially in like the state of California, where there isn't a lot of VRH shows as we speak. So I think any question and any way that I can help or get those questions answered properly, I'd be glad to.
Okay, thank you very much. And I want to thank you, Bryce, for being an advocate for VRH and also for participating in West Coast Ranch Horse the way that you have. We're really lucky to have you come and share your experience and expertise.
You're very welcome.
So with that, we'll let everybody go, and let me know if you have any questions, or go ahead and email Bryce. But thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you at the show. Bye, everybody.